Hello, and welcome back to the Stronghold. I'm the Magi, and on this dark and stormy night I will be your host as we discuss the nuts and bolts, if you would, of the Duskmourn House of Horrors set, intended to make this set feel different against the never-ending parade of standard legal sets. Specifically, we will delve into the mechanics and archetypes of the set. But before we get into all that, this season Duskmourn is focused on that horror genre and all of those fears that us 1/1 human tokens tend to share. But you know what I really find horrifying? Only 1/3 of the viewers that regularly watch my content have subscribed to the channel. So come on guys, take a moment, sub to the channel, support the content, and be sure to check your notification settings so you never miss out on a thing. Now, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, right. Alright kids, so right off the bat, brace yourself, because this is going to be a serious vibe check as we transition from Bloomborough Standard into Duskmourn Standard. I mean, I'm not even sure this graphic does it justice. This is probably the biggest about face we've ever seen in a standard Magic lineup. And Duskmourn is going to feel different for good reason. You see, thematically, this set is really built around the idea of those spooky horror-style movies, games, comics, all that good stuff. And its mechanical backbone is that enchantments matter. The primary way that they are going to make enchantments matter in this set is the core mechanic is actually introducing a brand new enchantment subtype, that is rooms. This is effectively a split card, but unlike many split cards, you're not choosing between the two halves. Once you pay the mana cost and put the card into play, you can then later pay the other mana cost, unlock that door as well, and get the benefits of both sides. A somewhat unique mechanical attribute here. One little rules tip to be aware of: if you somehow cheat this into play without paying its mana cost, it still is on the table, on the battlefield, so to speak, but neither of the rooms would be unlocked in that case. As this appears to be the core mechanic of the set, it will make or break the limited environment in much the way the battles and sieges did in a prior set. If it's good, the limited environment is probably going to be good as well. If this falls flat, we are probably going to have a questionable limited environment. The blue-red archetype is built solely around doors from what we can see at this point. So again, this particular mechanical attribute is going to make or break that archetype. And they have gone all in, as rooms are available literally at every rarity and every color. The second mechanic that they have given us to facilitate enchantments mattering is the eerie mechanic, which triggers whenever an enchantment you control enters or you fully unlock a room. And they are also quick to point out that that means room cards can trigger eerie twice, either in the same turn by unlocking both rooms, or when you first play the room and then when you unlock the second door. Eerie is most likely to appear on permanents at lower rarities in order to facilitate its use in the limited environment, much like we see it on the Scrabbling Skull Crab, 1 mana 0/3 that mills 2 cards every time Eerie triggers. Everybody loves a little mill crab action, don't they? I also want to take the opportunity to point out that I have an existing Enchantments Matter mill deck available on my Ether Hub, and our boy, the Skull Crab here, is going to fit into that very nicely as a rebuild. Another card to take a look at is the White Human Doctor for 3 mana, 3/3, with eerie, and whenever it triggers, the cult healer here gains lifelink until end of turn. One of the more interesting uses of this. Eerie is very clearly a companion mechanic to the core rooms and doors mechanics. So it is possible to show up at any rarity and in any color. But we know that the Azorius and Dimir archetypes for this set are going to be much more all in on the eerie mechanic as well as enchantments mattering. Just in case this set doesn't have you Delirious just yet, Delirium is a returning mechanic in the set, which cares about having 4 or more card types in your graveyard. I will caution folks, this cares about card types like land, enchantment, creature, etc., but does not care about subtypes. A creature is a creature, an enchantment is an enchantment. For example, Patchwork Beastie, a 1-mana 3/3, cannot attack or block unless the Delirium condition has been met. He also enables this because at the beginning of your upkeep, you may mill a card. Fear of Burning Alive is a 6-mana 4/4 nightmare creature. When it enters, it deals 4 damage to each opponent. And when the Delirium requirement is met, whenever a source you control would deal non-combat damage to an opponent, Fear of Burning Alive also deals that much damage to a creature that player controls. Please note that both of these creatures also feed Delirium. In the case of Patchwork Beast, it is both an artifact and a creature, and of course, Fear of Burning Alive is a creature and enchantment. So either of these going to your yard is going to get you halfway to Delirium all by itself. Thus far, the Delirium mechanic looks to be pretty exclusively in the Jund colors, red, black, and green. And the red, green, and green-black archetypes have been confirmed by Wizards to be centered around the Delirium mechanic and graveyard shenanigans. That might lead you to believe that the red-black archetype would also be somewhat graveyard Delirium-based, but Wizards has indicated that that is more sacrificial in nature and not really built around Delirium, although they do have some noticeable overlap mechanically. Delirium is a returning mechanic even on the Arena platform, as it was recently introduced in Shadows over Innistrad Remastered, and its expansion could have some ramifications for the Eternal formats here on Arena. On the other hand, in Standard, Delirium may face some challenges as it bumps directly into 2 existing mechanics. One, Collect Evidence, and the other, Forage, both of which want you to remove cards from your graveyard, where, of course, Delirium wants you to have specific things in your graveyard. It's not insurmountable, but it also doesn't flow particularly well. And while that potential conflict might be dreadful, it's not nearly as dreadful as our next mechanic, Manifest Dread. This is yet another spin on the face-down card mechanics. When you Manifest Dread, you look at the top 2 cards of your library, you select one of those cards to be placed face down as a 2/2 creature. If the card that you selected is in fact a creature, you can flip it up at any time by paying the creature's mana cost. The unselected card, the one not placed on the battlefield, is then placed in the graveyard. On the Arena client, the face-down card on the battlefield will automatically be represented by the Manifest token. Manifest Dread could also trigger a bit of a face-down card revival, as a similar mechanic is also present in Standard's Murders at Karlov Manor, as well as in the Eternal formats through the recently reprinted on Arena Khans of Tarkir. But we will definitely be seeing it as the primary mechanic for the blue-green Simic limited archetype. Next up, we have the Survival mechanic, which, not surprisingly, is a keyword ability found on Survivor creature types, and cares about the creature beginning your second main phase or your post-combat main phase tapped, and when it does, it gains additional benefits, like Acrobatic Cheerleader, which would gain a flying token, allowing it to fly potentially for the rest of the game. However, it only triggers once for that card, so if it loses that counter for some reason, it has no way of getting it back on its own. Cynical Loner, on the other hand, allows you to search your library for a card and put it into your graveyard anytime survival is triggered. That can be pretty powerful in the right deck. And of course, we've got Shrewd Storyteller, the signpost uncommon for the green-white Selesnya deck, which gets a +1/+1 counter on target creature anytime its survival mechanic triggers. Now, I've heard an unreasonably large number of people arguing that this mechanic is no good because none of these creatures can reliably survive combat. To which I say that sending a creature into the red zone is not the only way to tap it. Just in standard, things like Convoke, Crewing, and Mounting are all excellent ways of tapping creatures without risking that creature in the red zone. And don't forget, things like Crew and Mount can be specifically overpaid. For instance, Mobile Homestead has a crew cost of 2, but you can tap 27 creatures to crew it if you so desire. You can crew it once it's already a vehicle. There's absolutely nothing from stopping you from doing it over and over again, or as a mass overpayment. And finally, Survival is the namesake mechanic for the green-white Selesnya archetype. And I believe it's going to be very heavily present in the much more generically named Boros Aggro and Orzhov Reanimator. It's been a long time since we've had a dedicated Reanimator archetype in Standard or in Limited, and I'm very interested to see what they do with it here. I do, again, think the mostly white Survivor mechanic is going to be very heavily represented in both the Reanimator and Aggro limited archetypes. I'm sure you've noticed that many of the creatures in this set are enchantment creatures in order to further that enchantments matter theme within the set, which brings us to one of the final new mechanics of the set is Impending, which is both an alternate cost and a time delay mechanic. This keyword mechanic appears to be found exclusively on a set of mythic rare enchantment creatures such as Overlord of the Floodplains. And any of these can be played the normal way by paying their full casting cost, and they would enter as an enchantment creature. Each has a enters the battlefield ability. For instance, in this case, when it enters, draw 2 cards and then discard a card. However, you could also cast them by paying the often reduced Impending casting cost, in which case it would enter the battlefield as an enchantment, but not as a creature. It would have a number of impending counters, typically 4, like on our Overlord of the Floodplains here. And at the end of each of your turns, one of those impending counters is removed. When the final one is removed, it also becomes a creature in addition to its enchantment type. And although it's not a specific mechanic, there is a cycle of rare enchantment creatures that work in an almost inverse fashion. Because when you pay the mana cost, it enters, of course, regularly as an enchantment creature. However, when that creature dies, it actually returns to the battlefield as an enchantment, conveying many of its static abilities once more. So there it is, guys. My thoughts on the set's mechanics and archetypes. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. How does this set shape up for you? What do you feel about the vibe shift from Bloomburrow to Duskmourn? And what do you think is going to be the limited environment? And before we go, while every member of this community is important to me, I just wanted to take a moment and give a shout out to those patrons providing financial support. and keeping the stronghold from being a complete financial black hole. And of course, let me leave you with some suggestions for your next step here on the channel.